Imagine walking through a glittering city on a cold December night, where golden lights shine in high towers. But one man's heart feels emptier than the champagne glass in his hand. That man is Michael Grayson, a powerful millionaire CEO who thought he had everything until he stumbled upon a scene that would shatter his world and rebuild it forever. In a dark alley, a little girl with tangled hair and no coat clutched her baby brother, shielding him from the freezing wind while searching through trash for survival. Her eyes held no childhood, only fear and fierce love. What Michael did next wasn't just about saving two children, it was about rediscovering what it truly means to live, to love, and to heal. This is not just their story, it could be yours too. Stay with us and subscribe to Loss and Healing for more powerful journeys of hope. The clinking of crystal glasses rang through the air, mingling with hollow laughter that echoed against walls of polished glass and marble. Michael Grayson stood at the center of it all, his face set into a smile so practiced it felt like a mask. Around him, the Boston elite celebrated under chandeliers dripping with light, their sequined gowns glittering, their tuxedos pressed to perfection. Yet Michael felt none of the warmth the scene suggested. In his hand, the champagne was chilled, but inside he felt colder still. Success had brought him to this place, yet it no longer brought him peace. Every conversation about stock prices, holidays in the Alps, or upcoming charity galas only deepened the emptiness in his chest. He nodded politely, but his eyes drifted toward the massive windows overlooking the winter skyline. The city sparkled like a jewel under frost, but all he could see was how far he had drifted from anything real. The music rose as the pianist played a cheerful carol, but it sounded distant, almost mocking. Michael set his glass down, excused himself with a vague gesture, and slipped away from the party. He did not wait for his driver. He wanted silence, a kind of escape that wealth could never purchase. The December night bit into his skin as he stepped outside, but he welcomed it. At least the cold felt honest. His Aston Martin roared to life, a sleek machine that matched his carefully built image. Yet tonight, it felt like a cage rather than a prize. He drove without purpose, letting the glowing streets of Back Bay fade into darker corners of the city. The well-kept storefronts gave way to boarded windows and tired decorations hanging limply across old brick. Christmas lights flickered weakly, unable to hide the weight of neglect. The snow piled in the gutters was not pretty or clean, it was the kind that told of hardship and survival. Michael gripped the wheel tighter as though the motion could anchor him. He did not know where he was heading, only that he wanted to leave behind the sterile laughter of the ballroom. His chest ached with a restlessness he could not name. For years, every decision had been calculated, every move aimed at building empires and conquering rivals. Tonight, none of it mattered. Tonight, he felt more like a stranger in his own life than ever before. Then it happened. Something small darted into the edge of his vision. He slammed the brakes, tires screaming against black ice, his heart pounding with sudden fear. The headlights carved into a narrow alley, illuminating a figure huddled beside a trash bin. Michael's breath caught. There, in the snow, stood a little girl. No coat, no gloves, only a worn red sweater that barely clung to her thin shoulders. The sleeves were frayed, her hair tangled, her cheeks raw from the biting wind. In her arms, she clutched a baby swaddled in scraps of cloth, his tiny face barely visible beneath a tattered blanket. A torn plastic bag of crushed cans dangled from her wrist, as if it were her only lifeline. For a moment, she froze under the glare of his headlights. Then instinctively, she turned her body, shielding the infant as though the light itself might harm him. The sight pierced something deep inside Michael. Before he realized what he was doing, he was out of the car, his polished shoes crunching in the snow. "Hey!" he called softly, careful not to frighten her further. "Are you all right?" The girl did not move. Her dark eyes locked on him, unblinking, filled with suspicion far older than her years. The wind cut between them, carrying her faint reply. "Please," she whispered, "don't take him away. I take care of him. I promise." Michael's chest tightened. That voice was not the voice of a carefree child. It was the voice of someone who had been forced to survive, someone who had already lost too much. He swallowed hard, forcing steadiness into his own voice. "I'm not here to take him," he said gently. What's your name?" After a pause, she answered, "Ruby." He pointed softly toward the baby. "Is he your brother?" She nodded. "His name is Eli." Michael stepped closer, kneeling so that his eyes were level with hers. The baby's chest rose faintly,
Here, take my
lips
coat.
tinted with blue. Alarm surged through him.
Thank you.
He's
You are so
freezing,
kind.
he murmured. Can I help you carry him? My car is warm. You can stay with him the whole time. I promise. Ruby's eyes flickered between him and her brother. For a long moment, the only sound was the rattle of the wind against the alley walls. Then Michael removed the scarf from his neck, held it out without touching her. Slowly, cautiously, she reached for it and wrapped it tighter around Eli. Michael's throat ached as he whispered, "Please, let me help." Finally, Ruby gave a single nod. With infinite care, he lifted her and the baby together, making sure she never lost her grip on her brother. She weighed so little it startled him. No questions, no tearsomely silence, as though she had already learned that trust was dangerous. Inside the car, the leather seats seemed like another world compared to the cold alley. Michael turned the heat on high and draped his coat over them. Ruby clutched Eli close, her small hands trembling. The baby let out a faint wheeze,
take care
too
of them.
weak for more. She looked
Are
up at
they
him
okay?
suddenly, her
We are
voice
here to
fragile
help.
but sharp. Mama said not to trust men in suits.
Please,
She said
give
the
her
bad
back.
ones wear
She's
nice
fine.
clothes too. The words cut through him. He
It is
glanced
okay.
down at
Everything
his
will be just
expensive
fine.
coat, his watch that gleamed under the light.
Really?
To her, he was exactly what she feared. I am not him, he said quietly. I swear.
Don't worry.
Ruby
It
did
is
not
okay.
answer, but she did not open the door either. Michael started the engine and pulled onto the road. Snow swirled past the windshield as the city lights blurred behind them. He drove
We've got a
not
problem
toward the
here.
towers of glass where
Get
he
ready for action.
belonged,
On it.
but towards St. Mercy's Hospital, the only place that might save the fragile life in her arms. In the rearview mirror, Ruby held Eli close, lips moving in a silent prayer. And in that moment, Michael understood with terrifying clarity. If he had not turned down that street, if he had not stopped, the baby might have died. Perhaps both children, and he would have carried that weight forever. For the first time in years, Michael
It's so
Grayson
good to
felt
see
the
you
chill
again.
of responsibility not for a company, not for an empire, but for two small lives that fate had placed in his path. The heater hummed softly inside the car, but the warmth seemed to struggle against the icy night that clung to Ruby's tiny frame. Michael kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching her clutch the baby as though the world might try to steal him away. The boy's breathing was shallow, lips pale and frighteningly still. Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. He had faced hostile takeovers, boardroom betrayals, and billion-dollar risks, but nothing had ever made him feel so helpless. The city rushed by outside the window, neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Ruby sat
My mom
silent,
always says
her dark
never
eyes
to go
locked
into
on
the
her
woods
brother.
alone.
Michael reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a bottle of water, unopened and clean. He held it over the seat. Here, he said gently. Ruby hesitated, then accepted it with trembling hands. She pressed the cool bottle to her lips but did not drink. Instead, she touched Eli's cheek with tender care. He is cold, she whispered. Michael swallowed hard. We are almost there, he said. Just a few more minutes. St. Mercy's Hospital came into view, its bright lights cutting through the dark like a beacon. As the car slid into the emergency entrance, Michael was already stepping out,
infant is
his
stable.
overcoat thrown around both children. Nurses froze at the sight of the powerful man rushing toward them with two fragile bundles in
I
his
will
arms.
protect this photograph.
His voice rang out, strong and
That's my
urgent.
mother, right there.
I need help,
Uh-huh.
now.
And that's
A
him.
team of nurses
Yeah.
surged forward. One reached for the baby, but Ruby screamed, her voice sharp with terror. Do not take him, please, do not take him. She clung tighter, panic rising. Michael immediately crouched down beside her, his eyes steady. It is all
can
right.
never be found.
I will stay with him the whole time, I promise you. Her lips trembled, eyes searching his face. You will not let them take him away? Not a chance, he whispered. I am right here. Slowly, she loosened her grip, and the nurses moved quickly,
Everything's
carrying
gonna be all right.
Eli
Just rest
into a
now.
room filled with beeping machines and urgent voices. Ruby clung to
that if they
Michael's
find
hand
us,
like it was her
we'll
only
disappear
anchor.
too.
He let her, guiding her gently inside. The sterile smell of antiseptic burned his nose, but all he could focus on was the pale baby surrounded by wires and blankets. The nurse looked up, face grim. Severe hypothermia. We are doing everything we can. Michael's throat closed. What do you need? Whatever it is, I will pay. Just save him. The nurse softened. We will. Minutes passed like hours.
Hello.
Ruby sat on a
Thanks for
chair
coming
too
in
big
today.
for her,
I
swinging
have some
legs
new
that barely
information for
touched
you.
the floor. Michael slipped off his gloves and
I saw some
scarf,
movement near the
feeling
industrial
absurdly
area.
out of place in his
Might be
expensive
dangerous.
suit. He found a blanket in the cabinet and offered it to Ruby. She pulled it around her shoulders, her eyes still wide with fear. Her voice
It is
was
very
small
important
when
to
she
consider all
spoke.
the risks before
Mama
making
said
a
not to
decision.
trust men in suits. Michael blinked, caught off guard. Why is that? Because sometimes, Ruby whispered, the bad ones wear the nicest clothes. The words landed like a blow. Michael's eyes drifted down to his platinum watch, polished and gleaming. For the first time in years, he took it off and set it aside, no longer able to bear its weight. He sat beside her in silence. Ruby leaned ever so slightly closer, the smallest sign of fragile trust. The door opened, and a woman entered with a clipboard. Blonde hair tied back, eyes sharp yet kind. "I am Clara Jennings," she said softly. "I work with children who have been through trauma. May I speak with her?"
Mama,
Michael
she said this would
hesitated.
end everything.
Ruby's hand tightened around his. "She does not know me, but she will not talk unless I stay," he said. Clara nodded. "Then stay." She knelt
We're going
before
to implement
Ruby,
the new
voice
system
calm
starting
but
next week.
steady. "You are safe
All
now,
departments are
sweetheart.
ready for the
Can you
transition.
tell me where your mom is?"
Yes,
Ruby
this is
looked
the
down.
counselor.
"She told
Can I
us to
help you?"
run. She said they were coming. She said they would dress like the good guys." Clara's brow furrowed. "Who was coming?" Ruby shook her head. "Mama
me?
said not
For
to
you.
say. She said if they get the bag, they get everything." "The bag?" Clara asked gently. Ruby pointed toward the corner, where the filthy plastic sack still rested. To anyone else, it looked like trash. Michael picked it up carefully, pulling out its contents. Crushed cans, a bent spoon, a broken pacifier, scraps of newspaper, and then a photograph,
To
worn
enhance
and
the security of our
water-stained.
industrial
A
park,
woman
we
with
have
dark
implemented
hair and
several
kind
new
eyes
protocols.
holding a baby, a younger Ruby clinging to her side, and standing beside them, a man in a navy blue suit. Michael's
It can
heart
be a very
stopped.
demanding field, and it's
He
essential to
knew that
understand the potential
face.
challenges you might
Darren
face.
Cole,
I
a
understand.
rival in business, a familiar
Sorry.
presence at galas
I
and
will not
boardrooms.
abandon you.
Powerful. Dangerous. This was no ordinary
Are you
case of
leaving
poverty.
to find
This
her?
was something else.
Are you leaving?
Something
to find
darker.
her?
Michael sat down heavily, the
I
room
will
spinning
be
around
back
him.
before
Ruby's
you
small
wake.
voice broke the silence. Mama said if he finds us, we disappear, just like she did. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying.
Let's review the plan one
Michael
more time.
clenched the photo in his hand, realization settling like ice in his veins. This was not about charity anymore. This was not about writing a check or donating to a hospital. This was about standing between two children and a predator who wore a suit. For years, Michael Grayson had built a fortune on strategy, control, and precision. But sitting in that sterile hospital room with a frightened
It is
girl
okay to
leaning
stand
against him and a
sometimes,
sick
but we can
infant
work
fighting
this
for life,
together.
he understood something new. Power was meaningless if it could not protect the innocent. And for the first time in decades, Michael felt a purpose stronger than profit. The machines beeped steadily from the next room, a fragile rhythm of life. Ruby's hand remained wrapped in his, small and warm against the cold that had followed him from the ballroom. He looked at her and made a silent promise. He would not walk away. The hospital corridor was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, filled with the weight of uncertainty. Michael stood with his hands buried deep in his pockets, his gaze fixed through the glass panel of the pediatric wing. Ruby sat curled on a chair inside, her knees drawn up, clutching the same worn blanket she had refused to let go of all night. She was too small for the chair, too young for the kind of fear etched into her face. But she sat without complaint, watching the door to her brother's room, as though her eyes alone might keep him alive. Michael had not slept. The hours stretched long, marked only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the bitter taste of vending machine coffee. He still wore the same suit from the gala, though it felt like armor that no longer fit. For the first time in years, his wealth and status gave him no comfort, no advantage. In the eyes of this child, he was not a rescuer yet. He was a man in a suit, and that was enough to make him dangerous. Clara approached, clipboard in hand, her voice calm but serious. "Eli's vitals are stabilizing," she said. "The doctors are hopeful." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. Hope was not something he often allowed himself. Deals were calculated, outcomes measured. But here, in this fragile space, hope was all they had. Clara hesitated before adding, "Ruby has not spoken much, but she is holding onto the bag. She will not let it out of her sight." Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "I looked inside. It is scraps. A photo, nothing of value." Clara's brow lifted slightly. Are you sure? Before he could answer,
There we
Ruby
go.
appeared in the doorway, the bag clutched tightly in her hands. She stepped forward, her bare feet soft against the linoleum. I want to show you something, she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that did not belong to a child. Michael knelt so their eyes met. All right, show me. Ruby reached into the bag and pulled out the same photograph he had seen earlier. Her small fingers traced the image. I remember this day. Mama was smiling, but her eyes were not. Michael studied the photo again. A woman, Isa, holding her children with love, etched into her face. But beside her stood Darren Cole, polished and powerful, his hand on Isa's shoulder as though he owned her. Michael felt his stomach turn. He had seen Cole shake hands with politicians, cut deals with billionaires, wear generosity like a cloak. But here, in this picture, he saw something far worse, a man who had invaded a family and poisoned it. Clara's voice was low. Do you know him? Michael's jaw tightened. Too well. Ruby clutched the photo to her chest. Mama said not to talk about him. She said if we do, he will hear us, even from far away. Clara crouched beside them, her voice steady. Ruby, do you know when this was taken? Ruby tilted her head, thinking, Last Christmas, Mama left him the next day. The words struck Michael like a blow. Last Christmas, while he was celebrating profit margins and acquisitions, Isa had been running for her life. Clara and Michael exchanged a look, unspoken understanding passing between them. If Isa had left Darren, and now she was missing, the danger was real and immediate. Michael rose to his feet, his mind racing. Then we need to find her. Now. Clara nodded, already pulling out her phone. There are systems, missing persons, hospital checks, shelters. I will call someone I know, Michael said. We cannot wait for systems, not with someone like Cole involved. Hours later, Clara returned with updates. No record of Isa in hospitals, no Jane Doe matching her. But then her voice dropped. A contact pulled traffic cam footage. 2 nights ago, a woman matching her description was forced into an unmarked vehicle. No plates. The footage cuts out seconds later. Michael's chest tightened. Darren Cole. It had to be. Ruby stood by the window, staring out at the snow. She did not cry, but her voice carried a truth too heavy for her years. She was taken. Michael crouched beside her again, lowering his voice. We are going to find her. Her eyes flicked toward him, testing his words. She is not just lost, she whispered. If he finds us, we disappear too. The chill that ran through Michael had nothing to do with the winter storm outside. For the first time, he realized this was not just about helping 2 children survive the night. This was a battle against a man who believed his wealth made him untouchable. And Michael knew that meant he would not fight fair. But as Ruby leaned against him, small and fragile yet fierce in her determination, Michael made himself a promise. He would not let Cole win. Not this time. He had built his empire on controlling chaos, on turning risk into reward. But this was not about numbers. This was about lives. And as Ruby slipped the photograph back into her bag and rested her head lightly against his arm, Michael felt something stir inside him. Something he had long buried beneath deals and deadlines. The morning light crept through the frosted hospital windows, but Michael had not moved from the bench outside the pediatric wing. The night had been long, stretched thin by restless pacing and unanswered questions. He had built companies on certainty, on numbers that could be bent and shaped. But this was a different kind of storm. Ruby was asleep in a chair inside, her head tilted against the armrest, her tiny hand still clutching the plastic bag as if letting it go meant losing her mother forever. Michael could not look away from her. She reminded him of someone he had failed to protect years ago. Someone whose absence had carved an emptiness into him that no success could ever fill. When Clara returned, her tone was brisk, her clipboard clutched close. There is chatter, she said quietly. A contact-confirmed movement near the South Harbor Industrial Park. It connects back to one of Cole's shell companies. If Isa is alive, she may be there. Michael's expression hardened. Then that is where we go. Clara studied him carefully. We cannot rush. If Cole is involved, it means security, false fronts, and risks we cannot predict. Michael shook his head. I am not waiting. You said it yourself, every hour matters. If Isa is trapped there, we need to act now. Clara exhaled, recognizing the steel in his voice. Fine, but we do this smart. I will coordinate logistics, surveillance, and timing. No lone hero moves. Michael nodded, though inside he knew he could not remain on the sidelines. He was no longer just a donor writing checks to charities. This was personal. He owed Ruby and Eli more than promises. Later that day, Ruby approached him in the hallway, holding the bag tighter than ever. She looked up at him with eyes too old for her small face. Mama said if something happened, I should keep this safe. From inside the bag, she pulled a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She unrolled it slowly, revealing a black USB drive.
That's the best option.
Michael stared at it, realization dawning. Clara's face paled. If that is what I think it is, Ruby whispered. Mama told me this would end everything. She said never let them have it. Michael closed his hand gently over the USB. You did well, Ruby. This changes everything. That evening, the hospital became their command post. Clara moved with quiet efficiency, calling contacts, mapping out possibilities. Michael sat by Ruby's side, the USB in his pocket, heavy with unspoken promise. He brought her warm food, tried to coax a smile.
Good morning,
At
everyone.
one point, she
I hope
handed
you are
him a
having a
drawing
wonderful
she had
day.
made with crayons the nurses provided. 3 figures under a crooked Christmas tree. Herself, her baby brother, and a tall man standing beside them.
Here for you.
She had drawn him.
Take your time.
You drew me? Michael asked softly. Ruby shrugged. You are part of us now. The words lodged in his chest. He folded the paper carefully, slipping it into his jacket like something sacred. By nightfall, Clara returned with a plan. The warehouse has irregular security patterns. There is activity after midnight.
Our
If
commitment
Isa
to
is
safety,
inside, she may be
food,
guarded,
and
maybe
stability
drugged.
is unwavering.
We cannot wait for warrants. We move tonight. Michael stood, his decision immediate. I am coming. Clara raised an eyebrow. You are not trained for this. I do not care, Michael said. I will not sit here while she suffers. Ruby and Eli deserve more than my absence. They deserve my action. She studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then suit down. No flashy coats, no noise. We move quiet. Michael returned briefly to the hospital room where Ruby waited. She looked up, her eyes tired but clear. Are you leaving? He knelt beside her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Just for a little while, but I will be back before you wake up, I promise. It is about Mama, isn't it? She asked. Yes, he said. Her small hand slid into his. Find her, bring her back. His voice caught, but he nodded firmly. I will. She studied him for a long moment, then whispered, You are not just helping us anymore, are you? Michael shook his head, his throat tight. No, Ruby, I am not. As he stood to leave, Clara waiting at the door, Michael realized the truth of his own words. This was not charity. This was not redemption for a past failure. This was family. A family that had found him as much as he had found them. The cold Boston night greeted them as they prepared to move. Snow swirled through the air, carried by sharp winds that stung against their faces. Michael zipped up a plain black jacket, stripped of any trace of his wealth. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a silent fortress at the edge of the harbor. Clara crouched beside him behind a rusted container, murmuring into her earpiece. Cole's men rotate every 6 hours. This is our window. Michael nodded once, his jaw set. We are not leaving without her. The team advanced, silent and swift. Michael followed, his heart pounding not from fear but from the weight of what was at stake. For the first time in his life, he was stepping into chaos not for profit, not for reputation, but for love.
These are good.
The night wind lashed across the harbor, carrying with it the salt of the sea and the bitterness of winter. Michael crouched low beside Clara and 2 of her operatives, his breath visible in quick clouds. The warehouse ahead of them was silent, but it was the kind of silence that carried weight, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, but it was not fear that filled him. It was resolve. He had made up his mind this would not end with Isa lost in the shadows. The team moved with precision, disabling the alarm without a sound. Inside, the warehouse stretched long and cold, rows of crates casting jagged shadows against the concrete floor. Every step echoed, too loud in Michael's ears, though the operatives moved like ghosts. Clara signaled toward a far corner. Thermal scans picked up movement behind that wall. Michael followed, each footstep heavier with anticipation. His entire life had been spent calculating risks, but no spreadsheet, no boardroom had prepared him for this moment. He pushed open a makeshift door, and there she was, Isa. She was slumped against the wall, her wrists bound, her face pale and hollowed by exhaustion. Her dark hair clung damply to her cheeks. For a split second, she did not register him. Then her eyes found his, and they widened in faint recognition, though she had never truly met him before. She was alive, but barely. Michael shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her trembling body. "You are safe now," he murmured. Her skin was ice against his hands, her breath shallow. She leaned against him with what little strength she had left. The sirens came seconds later, wailing in the distance. Backup. EMTs, law enforcement, the world closing in. Everything blurred, stretchers, flashing lights, shouts. Michael never let go of Isa's hand, gripping it as though his will alone could keep her tethered. Back at the hospital, fluorescent lights bathed Isa in stark white as doctors worked urgently to stabilize her. Michael stood outside the room, every muscle in his body tense, watching through the glass. He hated waiting, hated being powerless, but this was the only choice. When Clara approached with updates, Michael turned quickly. "How is she?" "She is weak, malnourished, but alive," Clara said. "She needs time." Relief washed through him, but it was tempered by the sight of Ruby rushing down the hallway. Her red sweater was loose, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. The moment she saw Michael, she ran straight into his arms. "She is here?" she whispered against his chest. "She is," he said, his voice rough. "She is alive." Together, they stepped into the room. Isa lay propped slightly on the bed, tubes connected, her eyes half open. When she saw Ruby clutching Eli, her lips parted in a silent cry. Tears rolled down her cheeks as Ruby pressed her forehead to her mother's. For a while, there were no words, only the fragile sound of a family remembering itself. Michael stood back, his throat tight. He had closed deals worth billions, but he had never witnessed anything like this, the raw, unguarded power of reunion. Isa reached for his hand, her grip weak but full of meaning. Gratitude radiated from her eyes, not the shallow kind of thankfulness, but the deeper recognition of someone who had stayed when others turned away. Later, when the room grew quiet, Ruby brought the plastic bag forward. She looked at Michael with determination. "I never let it go," she said. From inside, she pulled a small sock wrapped tight around a black USB stick. Clara's face turned serious. That could be everything. Payment trails, routes, names. Michael closed his hand around it, his jaw set. Then it ends now. That evening, after Ruby had fallen asleep beside her mother and Eli slept peacefully in Isa's arms, Michael stepped into the hallway with Clara. The plan was simple, at least in theory. A decoy USB, a sting operation, and Darren Cole forced into the open. But Michael knew nothing about this was simple. Cole was a man who hid behind polished suits and untouchable influence. This time, however, his power would not shield him. The sting unfolded at a freight terminal outside the city. Snow whipped through the air, stinging Michael's face as he stood in the shadows beside federal agents. Clara whispered into her radio, "Cole is in motion. Hold positions." A black SUV rolled into view, sleek and confident. Darren Cole stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks as though arriving at another business deal. In his hand, a briefcase. He approached the undercover courier who held the decoy USB. For a moment, time slowed. Cole accepted the device with smug ease, his arrogance dripping from every gesture. "Go," Clara barked. Agents surged forward, surrounding him with weapons drawn. For the first time, Cole's composure cracked. His eyes widened when he saw Michael step from the shadows. Fear flickered across his face. "You set this up," Cole hissed as the cuffs locked around his wrists. "No," Michael said calmly. "You did. The moment you decided children were disposable." The metallic click of the cuffs echoed like justice itself. Cole was dragged away, his expensive coat coated with snow and sweat. Michael exhaled, his chest heavy but steady. It was not over, not entirely, but for the first time, he believed in the possibility of closure. Back at the hospital, warmth greeted him like a reward. Ruby looked up from the playroom, her eyes searching his face. "Did you find the bad man?" she asked softly. "We did," Michael said, crouching beside her. "He will not hurt anyone else." Ruby's small hand reached for his. "Are we going to stay with you?" Michael hesitated only for a breath. Then he pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket and placed it gently on the table. "Legal papers, guardianship forms. If you want me," he said softly, "I am yours." Her eyes filled and she crossed the room to hug him tightly. "We do," she whispered. "We do." Michael held her close, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. He had not planned this. A week ago, he had been a man drowning in hollow wealth. Now he was a man with a family. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. Snow blanketed the streets of Boston with a softness that disguised the scars of the past weeks. Each flake landed silently on rooftops, railings, and the narrow sidewalks of a quiet neighborhood. Christmas morning arrived with golden light filtering through the blinds of a townhouse that was no longer just Michael's property but a home. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of cinnamon rolls and pine. Candles flickered in the corners, casting gentle halos against the walls. In the living room, Ruby sat cross-legged on the floor, her socks patterned with stars, a marker in her hand as she leaned over a piece of paper. Her tongue poked from the corner of her mouth in deep concentration. Beside her, scraps of drawings littered the table, colorful evidence of a childhood beginning to return. Michael entered carrying 2 mugs of cocoa, steam curling upward in fragrant swirls. He set one beside her. "It is still warm," he said. Ruby glanced up, her face brightening slightly.
Right now I'm feeling
"Thanks."
really calm
She
and
bent
focused.
back over the paper, adding final touches. Michael sat on the edge of the couch, his eyes moving to the wall above his desk. There, framed among awards and certificates, hung one drawing in particular. Ruby had given it to him days ago. It showed 4 figures holding hands beneath a crooked Christmas tree. A tall man, a woman in a pink shirt, a baby, and a girl with orange pigtails. Above them, a heart floated in the sky. It was imperfect, uneven, and yet to Michael, it was the most valuable thing he had ever owned. Down the hall, Isa's soft voice carried as she hummed a lullaby to Eli. The baby, now stronger, cooed against her chest. She looked different than the fragile figure he had rescued from the warehouse. Her bruises were fading, her strength returning, and though shadows lingered in her eyes, her smile came more easily now. Clara had arranged for counseling and legal protection, but it was love that gave Isa's spirit the light it needed. The sound of tearing wrapping paper brought Michael's attention back to the living room. Ruby lifted the lid of a small box and gasped at the set of glitter pens and a new journal inside. She beamed, holding them up. "I love it," she said, her voice carrying unfiltered joy. Michael chuckled. "I thought your bear was missing a nose in your last drawing. I figured better tools might help." Ruby laughed, her sound so pure it made his throat tighten. She leaned across the floor and hugged him suddenly, her arms thin but strong. "You found us in the trash," she whispered, "but you treated us like treasure." Michael froze. The words hit him with a force greater than any business rival ever had. He knelt to her level, his voice rough. "You gave me the one thing I could never buy, purpose." She smiled, her expression shy but proud. "Mama says we saved each other. I think she is right." At that moment, Isa stepped into the room, Eli bundled in her arms. She wore a cream sweater Michael had chosen from a store window days before, uncertain if she would accept it. She had, and now it looked like it belonged to her. Her hair was brushed, her eyes warm, her smile soft. For the first time since Michael had met her, she looked free. "I think someone is hungry," she said, gently patting Eli's back. "Me or the baby?" Michael asked, raising an eyebrow. She laughed lightly, a sound that filled the room. Both, probably. Michael disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a tray of cinnamon rolls, icing dripping lazily down their sides. They gathered around the coffee table, eating with sticky fingers and sleepy smiles. No contracts, no deadlines, only the quiet joy of a family rediscovering itself. Later, as snow drifted past the windows, Michael stood with a mug of coffee, gazing out. Isa joined him, her arms slipping around his waist. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You did this," she whispered. Michael shook his head. "No, we did." His eyes moved to Ruby, who sat reading aloud to her stuffed bear, Eli asleep beside her. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its handmade ornaments swaying gently. Ruby's newest drawing fluttered slightly from the wall above his desk. It showed the same 4 figures, but this time their smiles were brighter, their world colored with warmth. Michael felt a peace he had not known in decades. He had built towers of steel and glass, acquired empires and secured fortunes, but none of it had ever filled him like this moment. He realized then that the story had never been about saving a family. It had been about finding his own. The snow outside continued to fall, blanketing the city in silence. And inside that warm townhouse, something broken had healed. There are stories that live in headlines, numbers, and fleeting news cycles. And then there are stories that live in the heart. This was never simply about a millionaire CEO who stumbled upon two children in the cold. It was about the unraveling of a man's carefully built life, the collision between wealth and poverty, fear and hope, despair and redemption.
So how does that sound?
It was about discovering that even the most broken nights can carry the seeds of a brighter morning. Michael Grayson thought he was saving Ruby and Eli when he pulled them from the snow. In truth, they were saving him. They stripped away the glittering walls of isolation he had built around himself. Their fragile trust taught him that family is not defined by blood or wealth, but by the choices we make when the world demands courage. They reminded him that life's truest treasures are not found in contracts or accolades, but in laughter shared over cocoa, in a child's hand held during the storm, in the fragile heartbeat of someone we vow to protect. Isa's return was more than a reunion, it was proof that even when darkness surrounds us, light can still break through. Ruby's quiet resilience, Eli's fragile survival, and Clara's steady presence were not just pieces of a story. They were reminders of the strength that exists when people refuse to give up on one another. And Michael's transformation was not about trading suits for sweaters or skyscrapers for small-town mornings. It was about rediscovering purpose. He had spent years conquering boardrooms and chasing profits, but none of it mattered until he stood in a hospital corridor and realized that a child's trust was the most valuable thing he could ever earn. This story is about loss and about healing, about finding family in unexpected places, and about the kind of love that asks for nothing yet gives everything. It challenges us to look around, to see the invisible battles others are fighting, and to recognize that sometimes the smallest gesture in an outstretched hand, a promise kept, a willingness to stay can alter the course of a life. If this journey touched you, if it stirred something inside you, let it be more than just a story you heard. Let it be a reminder of what you are capable of offering to others. And if you want to continue exploring stories of resilience, hope, and the unshakable power of compassion, join us. Subscribe to Loss and Healing. Share these stories, keep them alive, and be part of a community that believes in light after darkness, in family after loneliness, in healing after loss. Because sometimes, saving others is how we save ourselves.